All right, so welcome to another episode of 22 at the Lips. This is the podcast from EMS providers to EMS providers and healthcare providers and your everyday average bystander and your mom across the street and your neighbor, whoever it is. If it's your first day, thank you for joining us. If you have somehow been following along this journey, thank you for joining us. So I'm going to be really honest. Today's a huge deal. I have a list of podcasts that I follow, whether it's for educational purposes or just to have background noise, because who wants to hear your thoughts at 2:00 in the morning? But one of the podcasts that I follow that I actually intentionally listen to is EMS 2020. 20/20. And you guys, I'll let y'all kind of, explain your title, because I don't know about y'all. I always have to explain my title when someone's like 22 at the lips. What does that mean? No, it's not an innuendo. But I have been following Chris and Spencer and I do one of those from day one. I'm a huge fan. I've told people, whether they're in EMS or not, I've told everybody about y'all's podcast, because one, it's not just educational, but it's funny, and it's good stuff, good quality stuff. But
it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. One guy on there is absolutely solid. It's that Chris guy, right, Spencer?
Huh.
That guy, yeah, he carries the show. He has to have a good chiropractor with the amount of weight that man carries on his back day in, day out.
I mean, yeah, his name's really more Atlas.
Honestly, that's what they call him around the office. That we don't have. No, EMS 2020 came from a play on the phrase hindsight's 2020. And because that's what we do, is we get to sit in our comfy chairs and just backseat medic other people's calls. So for those of you that haven't checked out our podcast, it's EMS 20/20. And yeah, that's what we do, is people send us calls. But yeah, the biggest struggle with our name is that we launched in May of 2020. And COVID also launched that year. And I think a lot of people, I think
technically it launched in 2019. COVID.
Oh, did it?
But yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
That's COVID-19. But
yeah, but like people,
accuracy, not a big thing of Chris.
It became trendy. Yeah, check a CVG, motherfucker, Spencer. Anyway, yeah. So. Right, but then COVID became popular in 2020. I think that would be fair.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And so a lot of people, I think, just thought we had an EMS show about a really effed up year in healthcare, but it wasn't. So,
yeah. So it's like Chris kind of touched on. It's very much like when you listen. This is how I explain to people, like people who don't know what the podcast is. Somebody submits a call that they ran. You guys review it and you take out what went well, what could have gone better next time try, kind of thing. Educational topics, bring in all of your kits ever, bring in darn oxygen.
Or if you don't, just take good notes so you can submit it to our show. That's all I ask.
I think one of the things that we really bring that I don't know that other call review podcasts bring is we try and tell it from the perspective of the providers who bring the call, because that is, I think, more important than just the facts themselves, is understanding the thinking of the person at the time that the decision was made. And I think that puts you into the spot of like, okay, this is what that provider was thinking at the time. These are the pressures they were feeling. And that, I think, gives it a little more, it gives it a little more depth than just like, well, they came in and at 10:52, these were the vitals that they had. Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is
go.
I think the biggest thing about it is it's applicable. And I think there's a bridge in education, because you always hear that term, it's like, well, and people throw this out. It's like, well, I guess in the classroom you would do that, but in the real world, XYZ doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I think one, I think that gets used as a crutch for a lot of people just not doing stuff that they should do. But two, it is true to an extent. A lot of training has a hard time kind of, like, okay, where does the rubber meet the road? What actually happens? And we really get to explore that with our show. And we really get to explore, what actually goes wrong. Like one thing, I've said it a few times on the show, but we very rarely get calls where someone gets on scene and like forgets ACLS. It's like, oh crap, is it CPR now? Like it doesn't happen a whole lot. There's almost always some other kind of factor that gets into it. Like you have a bizarre family member or in our upcoming episode, someone that maybe isn't a family member and we're not sure who the F they are. But anyway, little tease there, depending on when your episode here comes out. But yeah, or you'll have, the person's in their room is a cubbyhole in the basement and you have to get them out, and that's where things go wrong. And so when Spencer and I started this, we were actually camping at, on some camp area. We had all the kids and everything there. And we're actually sitting at a picnic table having a beer. And I kind of floated the idea a little bit because he had been on medical stuff, but I didn't think he would be down for it. And then Spencer was immediately like, I'll be totally down for it. I'm like, yes. And then Spencer really took it and ran with it. And working with Spencer has been awesome. And so, yeah, I'm not that great, but it's been pretty good. But yeah, when we started it out, we were having a conversation about like, well, what's all the stuff that we wish we knew coming out of school that school didn't teach us? And that was kind of the basis for forming the podcast. And then I think like we could do call reviews, and Spencer was really big on like, yeah, but call reviews, like, but let's really like make it from the perspective of the person giving the call. And he was really big into that. And so, that's kind of how the podcast formed. We're just trying to reach those areas of education that haven't been reached. So, or aren't routinely reached, I should say.
Yeah.
Right. And another thing that like I kind of advertise is that it's not just your Monday morning quarterbacking. It's not just like you talked about, like getting into the perspective of the provider, but also like, and y'all's recent episode, Put the Bunny Back, good one.
Thank you.
Laying out like these situations that come up, like, okay, well, we're gonna fly the patient. Oh, now we can't. Oh, wait, no, we still can't. And not just like, oh, well, that was a stupid move on that crew, but like also taking consideration of all the other events going on. It's like, oh yeah, I don't know what I would do. Or in one of my favorite ones, hey, you have a patient. Oh, also, they're coded, but also the other patient in the other room is coded. So what you gonna do about it? Like me, I sometimes go back and listen because I'm like, there are some calls that I'm not going to talk about because I do have to go back to shift on Monday and Mama's going to have a long week. But if it's just one, I'm like, I'm not overwhelmed, but I'm like, ooh, this is a lot. Let alone like, oh, let me go check on the other guy coding. Oh, it's been 1:45. Let's, So, it's very much educational. And then there's some that like my significant other is not an EMS, but we listen to, I forgot the name of it, but it was the trauma one.
That one, yeah.
Still under
of course.
But the patient was still under the car, and I think it was that one. It might have been another one because I kind of listened to a bunch at once.
Yeah,
but
I guess which one
literally, like, it hasn't been a while since y'all have had one, but it was a moment where I was like, what are you doing? Like, what are you actually doing? So I'm not going to lie. Sometimes I listen because I'm like, I don't know a whole lot about a whole lot, but man, I feel a little bit better about myself.
Yeah, that was, that might have been Pulling a Code Out of a Hat, was the name of that one. HAT being HAT, the acronym. So, that's it. Yeah, that was the one. Yeah, Pulling a Code Out of a Hat. That was an interesting one. But yeah, that one was a lot of fun too. But, yeah, I think the one you're talking about earlier with the double code is I See Dead People. And that is one of my favorite episodes. And I bring it up so often that someone commented on our social media, because there's an EMS 2020 drinking game, kind of an unofficial joke about every time like we do something that we typically do, like if I bring up the whole 4-year medic concept. But apparently they want to add every time Chris brings up the I See Dead People episode to that. Yeah, it's such a good episode too. And that's also the episode where we introduced our current theme song.
Yeah.
The original theme song was hilarious. It was a
choice.
It was a choice. It was like if NPR wanted to do EMS 2020. That was the start. Just like dun 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 dun, and that was it. Like I was about to deliver some very boring world events. That was the whole thing.
You guys also have the RSI channel that is super, super cool.
It is cool's one perspective. As the guy who primarily produces content for it, it's okay. Yep. The problem with it is, it's fun, and I really like doing it, and I wish people would be able to check it out. The main reason we started it was because I wanted to be able to have like a creative outlet to do some other things, and EMS 2020 is a lot of fun, to the point that like I even still 140 something episodes later, I truly look forward to getting to sit down and record it. And keeping it fun has been a big key to its success in the sense that we're still motivated to do it each and every day. But sometimes when we go outside of what people expect on EMS 2020, the viewership will drop. And that's fair because, if you're going to go sit down and you're expecting to watch Game of Thrones and then a different show comes on, you're like, the hell, it's going to turn people off. So I kind of wanted something to be able to be creative in another way. The problem is that video production, especially because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, video production just takes a long time. And you have to sync up a lot of different things. And if one component goes wrong, it's like, well, how do I fix that? And you have the audio and the video and that kind of stuff. And so it does take a long time. I do want to do more content for it. And I will. It's not, to be clear, RSI isn't going anywhere. It's going to stay. It's just a matter of when it can really kick off. But yeah, I liked RSI because I could talk about, like, I really want to talk about, the innovation attempts or the gut tubes that were going on in Rhode Island. Yeah, and all that stuff. And I went looking into that, and I'm like, gosh, this is not as clear cut as everyone made it out to be. I mean, everyone really jumped on Rhode Island for having these innovation rates. Specifically, they jumped on they have these EMT cardiacs there, which is kind of like an EMT advanced. But then you look at it and like, well, no, the ratio of failed intubation makes sense for the ratio of EMT cardiacs to paramedics there, which is different than every other state in the union. Every other state in the union, you have this many EMTs. And for those that are listening on audio, my hands are super far apart. And then you have like this many paramedics. My hands are now a little closer. And then you have the intermediary levels are always the tiniest group, the in-between group. And now my hands are like really close. Like if you were backing a vehicle and someone was doing this, you'd stop. So anyway, but yeah, and it's really close. Rhode Island's completely different. Rhode Island, the intermediary level is the largest group by a long shot. It's not even close. It dwarfs their EMT basics, EMT level. It dwarfs their paramedic level. And that's what's different about them. And so people were attributing these faulty intubations because like, oh, these EMT cardiacs are terrible because they had these missed gut tubes. And here's the thing, there may be a problem there, and there probably is. But it has nothing to do with the certification because if you look at it, they're actually underrepresented in terms of the amount of missed gut tubes. If you look at the actual ratio, they're probably doing better than other certification levels just because there's so many in Rhode Island. But anyway, that's go check out the at Rapid Sequence Info, youtube.com/@Rapid Sequence Info. You can see Rhode Island Part 1 and Rhode Island Part 2 are on there.
So lots of stuff to offer from Chris and Spencer. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of everything that is y'all's podcast, y'all's stories and whatnot, a couple of rapid fire questions. Okay. Number 1.
Ready.
What's y'all's favorite movies?
Oh man, I don't watch
Aliens.
A lot of movies. Oh yeah, Aliens is so much fun.
It stays good. Like other movies, you go back and you're like, oh man, The Lion King was such a great movie when I was a kid, and then you watch it as an adult, you're like, oh, this actually isn't as good as I remember. Yeah, but Aliens just persists.
Gosh, I'm going to sound really lame. I just don't sit down and watch a ton of movies. There's
You are right.
there's a mini series that I watched recently that I really liked. It's not quite a movie, but it's only like it's kind of a movie. It's just like when someone wants to make a long movie, they make it into a series. But it starred Michael Scott from The Office, whatever that actor's name is.
Stop. I know you're lying.
I can't. For some reason, I can't remember the guy's name because you're asking. I think it's called The Patient. And yeah, Steve Carell. And and he stars as and he's a psychiatrist in there, and he gets abducted by a serial killer who just wants help with his mental health. But he can't be honest with people that he's a serial killer, so he abducts this guy as his own personal therapist. And I watched that, and that's a really good series. I think it's on Hulu.
Okay. Favorite ice cream flavor, and when I say that, I'm not talking like one specific flavor. It can be whatever. If you want a flavor with specific toppings, like if you sit down and you're like, I want some ice cream, what is in your bowl?
I got this one. It is very specific. It is, we're not going to be doing this anymore, so it's super sad, but it is the Tillamook ice cream. They have, during the Civil War, not like the real one, the football one, between the Oregon Ducks and the Oregon Beavers, they make it's a version of moose tracks, which and then they have duck tracks and beaver tracks, and they're slightly different. And it's the duck tracks one that I like the most. I could give two
7 years ago. Tillamook came out with
exactly. Oh boy! So part of the Gettysburg Address they always leave out is when he starts talking about ice cream. But anyway, so that's that's my favorite ice cream would be Duck Tracks by Tillamook Ice Cream. I don't have a favorite movie, but that I have.
Yeah, I don't have a favorite ice cream, but I appreciate an ice cream that is versatile in all walks, and that has to be vanilla ice cream because you can put it on everything. You're like, oh, I have cake, vanilla ice cream. I have pie, vanilla ice cream. There's not one situation where vanilla ice cream is where you're like, wow, I am underserved. This strawberry rhubarb pie. You know what it needed? Moose tracks.
But you could though, because I mean, it's essentially like it's vanilla ice cream with chocolate caramel swirled in with little chocolate candies in it.
Yeah,
I'd put that on a steak and eat it.
Jesus Christ!
I don't care.
I have found that like sometimes two really good things that you think should go together, like chocolate and strawberry rhubarb, just don't.
Just don't.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever had a strawberry rhubarb pie.
Well,
that just killed the whole show. That was it. All right, cool. Wow. That was
I'm allergic to strawberries, so I'm not even gonna vouch in on this. I've never had one, and now I never will. So it must be nice.
Yeah. Well, don't have a strawberry rhubarb pie, but have a rhubarb pie. It's a friend of mine is like, why would you have an onion pie? Because that's essentially what it is. But fuck that. It's delicious. And I stand by that swear word in that moment. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. It was worth it.
Yeah, it was worth it.
An onion pie.
All right. So before y'all started EMS 2020, before medical stuff came around and all of those great things, what's y'all stories? Like what? No, I'm not talking like when you ask your patient, when did the pain start? And we go all the way back to like 20 years. Like I'm talking like y'all stories in EMS. Like why did you join EMS? Y'all are flight medics now. Wow. Why did you get into flight? I'm just kidding. What's y'all's backgrounds? Like what, and then if you also want to kind of add in like a reflection of like where you are now with the podcast, and you got all these listeners and all these people that ask questions and bring up these calls and stuff like that. Do you ever have like reflection moments of like, man, if I had known I would be here when I first started versus where I am now, that kind of thing? Like, do y'all ever have that?
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, I just summarized a completely unrelated YouTube channel to you a little bit ago, and that was a pretty close-ended question. And now you're giving me this. I mean, it's a lot of time. By the way, I'm not offended if you cut anything I say. It's totally fine. It's
I'm
totally
actually
fine.
going to cut all of you and just keep Spencer. And
Oh, hold on! I got to take this mic that I Chris bought me and drop it.
But Spencer's really just a construct that I made anyway. So really, you're just keeping me. Well, Spencer and I actually have a shared history. We actually go way back before EMS.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, we went to the same high school.
Yep.
We didn't hang out at all.
We were not friends.
No.
No.
In fact, when we finally met up again, we were both taking a technical rescue class at PCC, and I walked in there, I didn't know anybody, but I'm like, gosh, hey, I think I walked up to you and I said, hey, is it Oliver Spencer or Spencer Oliver?
Hmm.
And he's like, Spencer Oliver. And then we sat next to each other and we joked about the high school we both went to. And then at the time, Spencer was driving a Geo Metro.
Yes.
And it was funny. It was a shitty Geo Metro with a great stereo. And but it ended up getting a great stereo. But that day, you needed to take it back to some car place because something was wrong with the stereo. And we walk out to his car. And I don't know how this happened, but somehow he slams his finger really hard in the door.
In the trunk.
In the trunk, that's right.
Yeah.
It was a hatchback Geo. Really hard. Like his finger, like Alexis, his finger did not look good. It looked bad. But Spencer's super dedicated. Like I think a lot of people be like, oh, I got to go home, get this taken care of. We go back to class. He finds a bowl and some ice, and he's just sitting there in class with his finger like in this bowl of ice the entire time, just taking the whole class. And then I'm like, well, hey man, you should come work for us because I get a headhunter's fee if you come work for me at the ambulance agency. I was driving wheelchair vans at the time, or was I in the ambulance?
No, you're in a wheelchair van at that point.
Okay. Yeah, and then Spence came over, and then but I guess I'll start with my story about what got me into EMS, and part of it was access. Is my dad was in EMS. He was a paramedic for a private ambulance company, and then he became a paramedic for a fire department. And I originally, just being slightly rebellious in my teen years, didn't want to do EMS at all at first. I'm like, no, I'm going to go into the tech field and all that stuff because that's really booming right now. And then I tried to do that, and I'm just like, I'm not that smart. I'm not. This is not. I didn't really. I mean, the people in that field, they're great people and everything, but like the particular people that I was trying to work with and taking classes with and trying to move in that career, I just didn't gel with that group very well. And so that kind of drove me away to go do something else. And then I witnessed a pretty bad accident and pulled over to try and help. And I'm like, it was a motorcycle accident. This guy he died. But I was just like, I can't do anything. So then I took like a CPR class and a first aid class. And my dad was like, why don't you come do a ride along? Then I did a ride along with the fire department. I'm like, all right, this is cool. I feel like I fit here. And that's kind of how I got into EMS.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm trying to limit myself. I want to give Spencer an opportunity to like tell his EMS story. I'm like, all right, we'll stagger it like a checkerboard because otherwise I'll just go forever.
Well, 7 years ago.
Right.
No, I moved back into the States in October of '99, and I went to what I described as like a prison of a middle school, and from there went to what was like an open concept high school, and I learned that I did not like school. It bored me, and I was told that I had to go to college.
Ice cream.
Zero vanilla ice cream. No, I was going to classes, and I just went. I was just like, oh God! At some point, I'm going to have to go to college, and I don't know what I'm going to do, and I don't like. I can write papers. I don't like to. I can do math. I don't like to. Like, there's a lot of things I just was like, yeah, I could do this, but none of this is at all interesting to me. And so one day I was going to skip school, but then there was a bus that was going to a place called the Skill Center, where high school students who don't really like high school can go and learn occupational skills. And so instead of skipping and not having an excuse, I was like, yeah, I'm going to get on this bus and go see where this goes. And so I went there, and there was like different courses that you could take. There was one where you could go into like hotel management. There was a police one that I was interested in, because they're like, yeah, we tase you at some point. And I was like, well, that sounds cool. Like, yeah, like I've never been tased.
Pick the outfit when he gets tased. Like, all right, that's weird, man, but cool.
But they were like, you'll have to learn a lot of laws before you get to that point. And I was like, that sounds kind of like that's a lot of down payment to get to the one thing I want to do. But there was a fire science classroom, and they were, they were spraying water on fire, and they were all wearing turnouts, and they were, doing stuff with fire engines, and it was outside, and I went, okay, yeah, I think I could do that. And I'd had family who were in the fire industry, and I just never thought of that before as an option. And I was like, at least I won't have to go to fucking math class anymore. Like there will be something else for me to do outside of like having to suffer through a full day of high school again. And so I got into that program, and I learned that I didn't want to be a firefighter. I do not have a personality that really jives with, I think, what the fire industry is looking for.
Really, anybody, but
yeah, or in it. Yeah, I'm not for everyone. I know. But I learned through that, I found EMS, and I was like, well, that sounds like an interesting job, because like everyone with ADHD, I like new things, and I like things that have adrenaline with them. And I found that those situations they were attractive to me. And so I told myself that, all right, well, I'll just become a paramedic while I figure out, what I'm going to do for college. Like that would be my college job. And, maybe, I don't know.
Basically, Spencer's still planning on leaving the industry for college. He just has
at some point. So, at some point I probably should.
What I like about your story is that at one point you're like, okay, I could get tased or I could light stuff on fire. Which career path do I want? No one said anything about math, so it's going to be one of these.
Well, that's what I was about to say. Like, you literally did all this so you could skip the math class, and lo and behold, you have a job that's like 80% doing the math. Like, what?
Yeah, it turns out that when you have a reason to do math that is exciting, suddenly math is a lot more fun. I'm still not very good at it. Like I do it via calculator, but
if you don't do this calculation and use your math right now, this patient's going to die. So good luck.
Well, but the advantage here, though, is because of Spencer's very deep hatred for numbers and counting and stuff. He's actually come up with a couple really quick ways. Like he always has the quickest, easiest way to like figure out a drip rate that he brings to the show. And so it's one of those things that I super appreciate about his hatred for numbers, is that I also hate numbers. Not like he hates numbers, but I still hate them. And he makes me hate them less.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of, that's one of the things I think, like the one of the principles of the show is like, you don't have to be good at things, but you have to know that you're not good at things and come up with solutions to solve that problem before it is a problem. So like, I hate converting milligrams to milliliters. I know how to now, but there was a time where like, if someone was like, all right, you have 2 milligrams of Versed and you need to give 0.3 milligram, 2 milliliters with 10 milligrams, and you have to give 0.3 milligrams to this patient. What do you do? And I just go, I'd give this to someone else. Because
give it to the guy that has a clipboard with the built-in calculator on top.
Yeah. but I realized like, oh, there's a really easy formula for this. And so I just wrote it down so that I never had to think about it again. Or like with our at our current occupation, I made a conversion sheet for RSI for all the drugs that we could potentially give with weights preset in there, so that if the time comes and it's 3 a.m. and someone's like, all right, hey, I need you to, give this patient 200 milligrams of ketamine, and 150 milligrams of suck or whatever, it's like, I don't have to think about it. I just go, okay, these are the numbers and this is the amount that I give, because I already did the math beforehand, so I don't have to do it in the moment.
Fair.
Yeah.
No, I feel that. So like I feel both y'all stories, because Chris, like my dad was a police officer for 20 something years, might have been 30, I lost count. A hot minute. But I grew up with like, I don't want to do the first responder things. I don't want to do that. And then I actually went to college in Spencer. So
wow, nice flex. Yeah, good.
I don't do anything with my English degree now. Haha. But that's what you get for an English degree, Alexis. But I went from high school English to
no, you pay your student loans. That's what you do with it.
Yeah, there you go. No. You get in debt and you have student loans. I don't know if you pay them with that degree.
It's a
I'm sorry.
Sorry. Yep.
But so I went from high school English teacher to, wow, I just quit. I have no clue what I'm doing. I didn't plan for this. I literally just quit one day. It's not my highlight of my life, but whatever.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to be a lawyer for whatever reason. So it literally was like day 2 of training at this law firm, where I'm eating lunch with the lady that's training me, and we're on like the 3rd floor, and I look out the window and I'm like, man, I have signed up for a 9 to 5 office job every day. And I look at her, I'm like, you think it would hurt if we fell out the window? She's like, are you okay? I was like, I don't think this is for me.
Not if you go ahead for, why am I saying that?
We're not giving anybody ideas. But no, so I get that though. Like, it's just very much, and that's what people ask me. They're like, how do you prepare for a shift? I'm like, caffeine. I'm really into in this moment, so I blare that on the way to work, and I just understand that I don't know what I'm going to expect, and I feel that.
Here's a question for you, because I think this is relatable to most people who stick around EMS. Because like there's people who are like, I think this would be an interesting job, and then they get there and they're like, it would be, except all the people I work with are weird. When you started working in EMS, how did you was it one of those moments where you're like, oh, I have found my people? What?
So when I joined EMS, I went to the EMT class and I was like, I'm going to be an ER tech, and then I'm going to be a nurse. And I have nothing but respect for nurses, but yeah, no. It was my first ride down on the ambulance that I'm like, yeah, this is it. Like, this is what I want to do. But I definitely was not ready for the clientele. Like, my dad told me before, he's like, people that are first responders, like, they're kind of crass and they're kind of this and that and the other, whatever. So at first I was just very standoffish, because I'm like, y'all are weird. Y'all say a lot of bad words. I can't believe you would joke about that. And then maybe a couple months later, I'm like, yeah, these are my people. I feel more at home with some of my coworkers than like.
Yeah,
I'm gonna leave it at that. I do love my family members. And then I've slowly noticed that like the longer I'm in this job, I think the worse my ADHD gets, or the more I'm recognizing it. Because now, like, me and my partner are on shift, and we actually had another crew member tell us, like, y'all are the most entertaining crew of, like, the most entertaining unit. And we're like, yeah, we are. LOL. So I feel like I've kind of, like, become that person that everyone's like, ooh, she's weird.
Where's that award at the EMS awards ceremony? Like, everyone's like, medic of the year, instructor of the year. What about, like, funniest crew? Here you go, guys.
There's actually not awards. It's printouts of emails that we get of HR supervisors telling us, please stop. Hey, you got another smart drive. The camera caught you doing this. Please stop doing that.
So Mark Frankham and I, the partner I had with my previous podcast, him and I worked together for quite a chunk of time. And we had a supervisor once, as a joke, make like a Mad Libs incident report where it was just blank spaces we could fill in. And it was just like, today, Mark and I did blank. It resulted in blank. We are very, very blank for the blank that we blank. Just like that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, it was a good time. And I had a spot for a picture we could draw too.
I don't know if it's like this for y'all. My partner made a TikTok yesterday of like, it's like this thing where it's like point of view, you sign up for a shift with us or whatever, and then it's like all these tiny clips with no context of little things we've done. And it got to the point where she's like maybe 3 minutes in creating this, and she's like, "Can you think I could post this?" And I'll look, I'm like, "Oh no, don't post that. We'll get in lots of trouble." So it, like all of the ideas, like it's a really good video. Find me on TikTok and go find it. It's funny, but no, but I feel like you have to have a little bit of that to make your shift enjoyable. And it's also, as far as like dynamics of partners and the people you work with in general, like you have to be able to have a little bit of that to get through your shift. Like it's especially, and I do want to point out one thing I've noticed with y'all's podcast. It's the people that you don't work with or the people that you don't like that you get those moments where it's like, oh man, I know I have them sometimes where I'm on a call and I'm like, I'm about to end up on EMS 2020 if I don't watch myself. Like,
Oh man, it's kind of funny you say that because every once in a blue moon, and we don't want our show to be used like this, and so but every once in a blue moon, we'll get a call submission where we'll read it and we'll be like, oh yeah, this person just hates their partner and wants to throw them under the bus in a grand public way. Like that's and so for that reason, we do change a lot of the. We don't change that much. We just change it enough to give people plausible deniability. And so, it's, but yeah, that is one of the reasons. So yeah, every now and then we do get someone that's like, I'm like, oh, you hate this person with a fiery passion. And that's why you sent this. They even suggested their own theme. They want their partner to be Darth Vader. That's bizarre. That's weird.
Dad? No, there was the one, I'll put Melon Horn if you want to contact me and find it. There was the one I had submitted, like the episode, which, it was y'all's beginning stages. It was not an intentional, I'm submitting an episode. It was literally, I had XYZ incident happen, and I was telling my partner about it, and I hadn't worked with him on the incident call, whatever you want to call it. And I was like, this was crazy. He's like, bro, you're an idiot. I'm like, oh, what? And so I didn't know who else to talk to. So I was like, I'm going to email these guys because they go over calls all the time. They'll be able to tell me if I was dumb. And y'all were like, yeah, that was kind of dumb, but we'd love to make it an episode. I'm like, oh. LOL.
Can't we? Yeah. Every once in a blue moon, too, we'll discover, and we always check with people who submit, like if we discover, for example, we did have a crew once that gave us a call, and while we're reviewing the call with each other, we're kind of like, oh, they kind of missed something here that they really should have done. And in that particular instance, we got back to the crew and we're like, hey, so we found that this should have been done instead. If you don't want us to air this call, we won't. And they were still really cool. It's like, no, we agree. You're right. That could have been done. We're fine with you still airing the call. And I thought that really spoke volumes about them as well. But yeah, we don't want to make people regret submitting the call. Yeah. So we try and we're always honest with our feedback. But if it's something where it's like, hey, so sometimes we make mistakes, and sometimes a better word than mistake is liability for what happened. And we want you to be aware. So,
yeah. And
sometimes the own host of the podcast don't check your blood sugar when it was very obvious from the get-go.
Or sugar pressures.
Or, yeah.
Ew.
I think that's one of the things that I do I appreciate about the program, and is that it would be impossible for me to do this show if I had to be perfect every time, because like if we were like, oh fuck, dude, we forgot this, we got to re-record this, and I think it sets the audience up for failure in a way too, because like like there are a lot of really good podcasts with a lot of phenomenal paramedics who could out paramedic me any day of the week, like. But one of the things that makes it hard is, and I think it's it's sort of just the way, like a function of my brain, where it goes like, well, of course they're going to be good at this because they're perfect,
Right.
like, and so getting to make mistakes on the podcast is like as dumb as they are, because I've missed sugar like a few times where for whatever reason it just does not pop into my brain.
Well, the best part is we had a doubleheader episode with 2 diabetic patients, and you missed sugar both times in one episode. That was.
I don't remember that exact thing, but I remember missing it a few times.
Or maybe you missed it in 2 different episodes that were close together.
I think I missed them in 2 episodes that were close together.
All right.
Yeah. But it takes the pressure off me. And I think like if I were listening to a person who was like, oh man, totally messed that up, but still like, like there was other content that was redeemable, then I'd be like, okay, cool. Like this person also makes mistakes. Like I also make mistakes. How relatable.
Right.
Well,
and I think I think there's a lot of value in watching people recover from mistakes than there is in listening to someone run a call perfectly.
Yeah.
And a lot of times too, things don't fall squarely into right or wrong. In fact, the episode we recorded yesterday, without giving too much away from it, it's an altered LOC patient. And at the start, and actually throughout, I disagreed with what the paramedics on scene thought it was. And I disagreed with some of their decisions. That said, one of the things that we made sure we pointed out in the episode is that their decisions that they made and their diagnosis and what they thought was going on wasn't crazy at all. It was just different than what I thought. They just had different reasons. And so I think that's another thing I really do like about the show too, is it just kind of shows that different experiences as a paramedic are going to lead you to different things. And one of the things that Spencer had brought up during the episode was that, well, hey, these symptoms look really similar to what I've seen in these kinds of patients in the past. Yeah. And that has so much weight in how we do things. And so how one paramedic sees a patient is completely different from another, from how someone else might see a patient. And so I love that we get to talk about that, because we get to talk about how much past influences can really influence decisions sometimes in the wrong direction, and how there's a human here. And when you back out and you Monday morning quarterback it like we do, it's really easy to be like, oh, well, this is where you went wrong, and that kind of stuff, because I'm not you. I wasn't there. And I don't have the same influences and biases that you have, which, by the way, we all have different influences and biases when we walk in on scene. But yeah, that's just kind of one of the cool parts about doing the show, is to get to see those different perspectives.
And that's another reason I'm a huge fan of, just like y'all were talking about. It's not like I'm going to turn it on and expect like these perfect providers and these people that, I mean, in the EMS community I look up to, but I know like they probably haven't made a mistake in 5 years. And to be quite honest, if they do, they're not going to admit it. But, y'all are, I mean, like you said earlier, you're relatable, but it's also like, there's moments throughout episodes that one of y'all will be like, oh, wait, I didn't think about that. Oh, wait.
Oh, yeah.
And I love it, because sometimes I'm like, oh, I didn't think about it either. But I'm just listening, so I'm like, haha, now I know. I have a leg up.
Yeah. Well, good. That's exactly why we made the podcast. So like to hear that.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the biggest compliment, right, Spence? It's like when people are like, oh, hey, man, like your podcast really helped me, for the field, or really prepared me for these things, that kind of stuff. Because like as cheesy as it sounds, that is why we got into it.
Yeah.
So that, and obviously the fame and money. So.
Yeah. Still waiting on all of that. But
how's
that going?
Yeah. I mean, it's not there.
Well,
it's just
I'm recording in my uninsulated garage with a red blanket behind me, and I
think people out there might have the perception that I just take all the company's money, and it is fair that most of the company's money is stuff that we've bought that is in my place. So now that I realized that,
Tesla in
like,
the driveway too.
oh yeah, exactly. Well, which Tesla were you talking about? But anyway, but yeah, like there's a camera, there's all the tripods, there's lights, there's the whole like the studio makeup and all the foam padding, and then the computers and this microphone and all this stuff, which given was all purchased by our company, and it's in my house. But it's our money, Spencer, so don't worry.
I'm just borrowing it. Yeah.
You can borrow the Tesla whenever you want.
So, okay. I know used to whenever you would submit a call, it was email. Y'all now have like a whole form, and I went and I checked it out. I submitted one, but y'all haven't aired it, so whatever. No, I'm totally. I know y'all probably get that all the time. I'm totally joking, but you do have like different categories for your calls, and then you have I think it's like other or like not listed, something like that. Do y'all?
It's complicated. Is that
the
field name?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there like, do y'all have a specific pattern you look for? Like you're like, oh, we did cardiac this week, and then we're gonna do this week, and whatever. Or is there a specific category that you really want? Because I know, like in the day-to-day job on the ground, not your flight, but on the ground, it's like, I'll be like, oh, gosh, golly, there's a trauma. I hate trauma. But if we have a respiratory, I'm like, let me cozy up real quick. I'm so excited. So like, is there like specific calls that y'all like, or?
So I guess the question would be, is there calls that we prefer when we're working ground shifts, or is there a call that like calls that we look for the podcast? Okay. What I try to do when because I occasionally Chris will surprise me and go through and be like, hey, I took the call. Which,
okay, to be fair, there's a lot of stuff I do for this podcast.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
A lot.
He buys all the equipment and stores it at the Tesla. Like he's taking good care of me.
I had to get the Tesla Cybertruck to make more space, So there's that.
No, Chris has the hardest job, which is he has to edit all of our stuff. And there's a reason I don't have equipment, and that's because it scares me and I have no idea what I'm doing with it. And I don't know the first thing about editing. To Chris's credit, he's been like, hey man, why don't I teach you how to do this? And I've done the, yep. And that just never followed through because again, it scares me and I don't like it. So Chris gets that. And of course I like to give him the episodes where I'm like, hey, why don't we record Tuesday night? And he's like, it comes out Wednesday morning. And I'm like,
okay, pulling it all nighter. But to answer your question, there is actually the one we look for. There's actually a secret code that if you put in the body of your form will automatically get it aired. And you can figure out that code by visiting our sponsors and using our coupon codes. And I'm just kidding. That's the other thing I do for the podcast. Is I try and go out and get, we both do this, but I feel like it's, I have more passion for it. I don't know. I just wind up doing it more, but.
I feel like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what to do with my hands when I'm like, give us money. Do I hold my hands out like this in a cupping, like, please, sir, may I have more porridge? I don't know what to do with that.
But I go and get the money so I can get another Tesla. It's basically what it's like. But I'm sorry, you had a question a while ago about what we look for. I haven't answered it, so.
No, so what I try and do is I try not to do like I try not to do like, hey, I know we've done 8 cardiacs in a row. Here's number 9. I try and keep it varied. I try not to hit like it. There's always sort of, as I'm reading through the calls, I find like, I'm like, oh, here's things that I think will probably be the main lesson points or like big pullaways, or like, oh yeah, here's how this is another call with confirmation bias, once again, kind of skewing the providers, and leading them astray. I try and find things that aren't necessarily like the same learning points. And so like as I'm looking through calls, I just try and, make sure that I'm not hitting the same ones, over and over again, in a row. That's essentially it. I worked through the backlog of 418 submitted calls, and I'm currently looking at calls literally a year ago submitted today.
Which, by the way, it's not necessarily first come, first serve. So don't think
true.
you're going to be 4 years behind on calls, or a year behind, or it's going to be a year before your call gets submitted.
It's like, I retired from EMS 77.
This is going to be the whole. Oh man.
So y'all have done many episodes, and they're all great. And like you talked about earlier, you set out with an intentional goal whenever you started the podcast, besides just like because I can and I want to, but just like the general idea of like bringing insight, and especially for anyone that's not an EMS, when you have these calls that like, at the end of it, either like it went well, because y'all have had a couple of those that like they actually have gone really well. There was one episode on literally somebody got a refusal. I'm like, yeah, good job.
Yeah. Chris was so surprised.
I was because I'm sitting there the entire time. I'm like, well, there's no way this just ends in a refusal. It's on this show, an appropriate refusal. And I kept waiting. I'm like, are they going to get called back and find the guy's head fell off? Like something like that. It's just, it never happened. But yeah, that was a
surprise. He had a samurai sword in him the whole time.
There's an octopus attached to his face, and your partner's glued the arrow to that.
I was just saying, that reminds me of that the Fire Department Chronicle guy. Why would he do that?
That's not the point. What are you gonna do?
It's like you arrive to a house and you find that there are 37 cars parked in the driveway. The patient has some lab values that are off, and they need to go to the hospital. What you gonna do? It's like, oh, we're just gonna get him to the hospital. All right, cool, you're done. That's it.
So there are episodes that are good and have good endings, and things that, even though like things happen during the episode and you guys talk about it, like overall, like great work, pat on the back. However, we all have those calls that like you're on it, and at the end you're gonna have that moment where you're sitting either in the front of the cab because dispatches ask you to hurry up and drop off, go to the next call, whatever. But there's moments when you're like, can you do that? So you have those moments where it's like, man, like I have to sit back and think, and you guys open the door for that, for me, myself, and I, and everybody else to be like, oh wow, I don't know what I would do in that moment, but I'm prepared now in case my patient is in this situation, and they're sandwiches with spiders in it. But we'll throw in. But
I like it.
Yeah, the correct answer is just burn the place down and walk away. Yeah.
There's an episode for anyone that hasn't listened to the show called Peanut Butter Spider Sandwich, and the name just stuck. I will spoil one thing: there are no sandwiches at any point in the entire episode. But yeah, if you're sitting there and you're like, if you're trying to diet or something and you want to lose your appetite, just go listen to Peanut Butter Spider Sandwich. It's actually been a while since we've had a good gross one, Spencer, like that.
Okay, I'm on it.
Yeah, there we go. Let's get back into that. Yeah, I haven't retched during an episode in a while. It's been a lot of fun.
But so yeah, you guys have all these episodes and you have all these topics, and y'all talk about like the clinical side of things, obviously. Do you ever have moments where it's like you're recording the episode, you're talking about the names, obviously y'all are more than qualified, you're flight medics, but do you ever have moments where it's like, man, if people knew that I really sometimes don't feel like, I don't know how to put this, not like I don't know what I'm doing, but like I have made this mistake one time, or basically imposter syndrome, because anytime, like I had somebody one time, bless their sweet soul, they were asking about going into EMS, and they were like, what are some pointers, XYZ, and I'm like, oh, this, that, and the other, think about this, think about that. And they're like, well, if I'm going to take anybody's advice, it's going to be from you, because you have that podcast and it's cool. I'm like, why are you listening? But also, I'm like, oh, baby, no, I almost quit yesterday because I don't feel like I know what I'm doing. Like, don't listen to me. But I'm just kidding. Please listen to the podcast. But Jeff, Master of Medics, I'm so sorry.
Why did you have faith in me?
The views expressed by Alexis are not necessarily that of 22 at the Lips. Yeah.
Oh God, I've definitely had moments where we've done advertisements, and I'm like, why do people pay us for this? Like, why? Well, even like our most recent ad we did for the Fast 24 conference coming up, which actually I believe Master of Medics is going to be at. They will be both speaking and teaching one of the pre-conventions, or
I have to
pre-con.
pause you real quick. Dude, I knew as soon as this recording was coming up, I was like, if Chris drops some stupid thing about this conference like he has in the past episode.
I'm excited to go though.
I'm only saying that because I'm stupid jealous. I am so stupid jealous. But anyways.
Yeah, but we recently did an ad for it, and I had so much fun doing the ad. And then anyway, it was a great time, but it was so stupid. But and then I'm done with it. I'm like, oh, I think this is funny, but it's really dumb. And I'm like, why is anybody paying us to to speak on their behalf at all? And then our contact with FlightBridge ED sent an email immediately and was like, this was amazing. This was absolutely hilarious. I laughed my ass off. And I'm just like, yes, these are the right people to advertise with. Because we decided early on, like, we don't want to, like, it's really important that we advertise like with the right people for a number of reasons. Because a really good way to make sure that your listeners don't follow your sponsors is to have crappy sponsors. And then people will be like, oh, yeah, I'm not going to trust anything Chris and Spencer say. So we're selective. We get a lot of offers, namely for like bizarre energy drinks and stuff will come through. Like, this one will give you more power. Or like, hey, our doctor wrote a book and wants to be on your podcast so you can interview him. And I want to be like, do you listen to our podcast?
Yeah.
When was the last time? The only time we have guests on our podcast is if they want to contribute to a call.
Yep.
And we've stood by that, and we've had some awesome guests because of that. But yeah, we've kind of stood by it. I'm just kind of talking again, aren't I? All right, cool. Anyway, back to you, Alexis. Sorry.
To your point, if like when we're reviewing a call, if like there's definitely topics where I'm like, I'm not qualified to talk about this. That's where we try and get people who might be more qualified to weigh in and come in and give us not just like we don't want people who are like, oh, I know about this in a clinical sense. I'm like, well, I also can read Wikipedia, but you want people who have managed cases similar to that. Like there's one that is on hold because it's a really just incredibly complicated polypharma overdose, and like I have handled polypharma overdoses, but I would just be on Wikipedia going like, okay, and so this medication does this with this effect, and they also took this one. I don't know how they work together, but probably bad. It would be far better to have a toxicologist come on and go like, oh yeah, no, when these combine, they synergistically work to try and kill the patient. Or to be like, what was The Simpsons where like, Mr. Burns, you are alive because literally every disease known to man is trying to kill you and they're competing. And it's like they're trying to go through a door all at the same time and they can't, Like, so yeah, like that's how we get around those. And I think we're honest if we're like, yeah, I've never run a call like this before. I think that that's important too. So
for me, kind of my imposter syndrome moment wasn't necessarily just in the podcast. It was actually going from ground to flight. And I hadn't been a new guy for 15, 16 years because I had a lot of experience with my previous agency. And I got in there, and flight it's a different job. I'm very used to like, all right, this is a really serious call. I'm going to take a bunch of firefighters with me. I'm going to have a team. Everyone in my area knew me. And so, which goes a long ways when people know who you are. And everyone knew me. And if I was in the PIC position, there was kind of a baseline level of trust, or if I had someone else in the PIC position. I knew them and I had, and I trusted them. And there was that. To go to a new agency, not only did I go to a new agency, my base was located in an area that was not the area I'd worked in. So I went from knowing everybody to knowing precisely 0 people. And if you have a really bad call on flight, which I don't want to say every call on flight's a really bad call because it's not. But, well, okay, how about this? On ground, I distinctly remember one time picking up a guy who admitted that he said he had chest pain, so we would get there faster because he had gotten drunk in the back of his car and peed himself and wanted to get cleaned up at the ER. Mm-hmm. I've never landed a helicopter for that, ever. So that doesn't happen. But generally speaking, the majority of your calls are going to have people that need something done. You really don't just do blasé transports. And so there's going to be something you're either watching out for or something you're actively doing. And you have you and your partner, and that's it. You can sometimes take riders, but if it's going to put it over the weight limit, the answer is no. If it's going to be unsafe, the answer is no. In fact, the times I've taken riders on flights is super minimal. And so here I am. I've got a whole bunch more meds. I've got IV pumps that now I deal with on a daily basis as opposed to just on a transfer every once in a blue moon. I have to suddenly really know the ventilator and how big of an impact ventilation and proper vent settings can have on your patient, from their blood pressure, to their ventilation status. And it was all coming at me all at once. And I felt like a fish out of water. And I remember one time I sat down with the guy who was training me, a nurse. And I said, yeah, I don't think I'm doing very good. He goes, oh, you didn't feel like that for like 5 years. I'm like, oh. All right. And he goes, you're doing fine.
Yeah.
And so I remember the first call where I finally felt like, okay, because I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, this guy must think I'm a moron. He must be sitting there being like, oh, he came in with 15 years and he is absolutely brain dead, which is how I felt. And then finally we had a call where we landed, it's a small ER, and they have a patient who's actively coding and they need to get the patient out. But we land and they're coding, and the doctor's like, hey guys, just wait a second. I don't think we're going to fly after all. I don't think we're going to make it. I'm like, okay, cool. And then like, hey, we got pulses back. I'm like, oh, great. So oh, that's stuck out. Anyway,
no, that's so relatable though. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Real life, man.
And so I go back in there and they're running this code. And in my internal opinion, it's not going great. It could be run better. And so I look over at my partner and I say, hey, at what point can we take over? And he's like, hey man, we're here. Like, it's our ball game. And I'm like, all right, cool. And so I go up to the doctor. I'm like, hey, do you mind if we run this according to our protocols just because we have to do the transfer and hand off? And he's like, oh no, not a problem. And then he leaves. He's just gone and just gives this coding patient over to us. And I'm like, all right, well, he's gone. And then I got to kind of reorganize things. I got to run the code. There were some paramedics also in that ER room along with RNs. Oxygenation was a problem. We fixed the oxygenation, so she stopped coding, and it went really good. And I was feeling like I was on top of the world. We were going to do an amiodarone infusion because she was in the pulseless VTAX. We were going to do amiodarone 150 over 10 minutes in a little bit as we were taking flight. Everything was set. And then we get airborne. We start flying. Patients, it's hard to call a recently coded patient stable, but they were stable. And then my partner looks at me and says, he goes, hey man, good job. I felt fantastic. And then we went for a fist bump, and then we fist bumped. And at the moment our knuckles contacted, the look at me alarm starts going off on the monitor. And I look up, and the patient's sats are now plummeting, and the patient codes again and then dies. But up until that point, well, the patient had a massive pulmonary embolism, and that broke free right as we were like landing. And
right as you fist bumped.
Yeah, right as we fist bumped. Yeah, probably because I picked up her arm and made it like a 3-way fist bump. Just but,
yeah.
Anyway,
so, what killed her? Pride.
That was it. So yeah, but to answer your question, like, do I ever have imposter syndrome? Absolutely.
I feel like it's inevitable. Like, I hate to like group it into in this job, but there are days when I don't want to do this job. One, right now I'm slowly emerging from it, but like I'm in this burnout phase right now. So right now it's very much like I just want to be home. I don't want to go to
Yeah.
work. I don't want to do these calls, whatever. But another big part of that is also like just we understand that this is not an easy job. And I even tell, like, if I ever have new EMT students or um, when I help teach at a school and stuff like that, I'm like, hey, look, like, even if you are an EMT, even if it is just that basic call, even if it is, I work in private EMS, so even if it's a transfer, you never know. You never know what could happen. So at any given moment, and I even say, like, the moment you put your uniform on in the morning or before you leave the house or whatever, people's lives are in your hands. Like, that's terrifying. So
Yeah.
I, even like you guys, full circle, talk about your 4-year medic. Like, when you lose that understanding of like, hey, this is actually a really important job, and whatever, when you lose that, like, you lose that what's the vibe I'm going for? Like, just compassion.
Perspective.
Yes.
Good word.
But you also, with that, you gain the understanding of like, oh no, I am just a human being, and I forget a lot of things. I don't remember what I got on my 5th birthday party, let alone like, I don't know why your blood pressure's tanking.
Yeah, no, I think that's relatable to, you know, because like I think we put everyone in EMS kind of on a pedestal when we're not in EMS and we want to get into EMS. You know, we look at the paramedics and we're like, I can't wait till I know everything like that person. And then you go to your paramedic program and you're like, I feel like I walked out of here with less than what I thought I was going to come in with. Like, I thought they were going to hand me a chip, I was going to upload it and, you know, like know how to deal with all these things.
Like the Matrix.
Yeah, and then you're like, I need to know how to handle cardiac arrest, VFib, and then someone's like, got it, and you're like, all right, I know how to fly this helicopter now. Like, oh, wrong upload. Sorry. ACLS. There it is. All right. No, but like we come out and we don't know that, and we feel like we should because we know our expectation of the people, you know, prior to being in that position was like they will know what to do. And that never actually is the thing, you know. But the problem is that we still have to go out there and respond, and so we feel like phonies because like I don't know what I'm doing half the time, but everyone else is pretty sure that I should know what I'm doing. And it's a really lonely, scary place until you find people who are like, oh yeah, half the time I don't fucking know what I'm doing either. That's number 3, by the way. I'm counting.
Well, dude, there was
and so in a way it's like,
it's a good thing I didn't speak for him at the start when I was just like, I'll stop dropping out.
I'm covered. I've got myself and Chris covered. No, EMS is sort of like a roller coaster ride. Like, it's really exciting, and then you're going up the clicker parts as you're getting up to the top, and you're like, cool, this is going to get really fun really soon. And then you go over it and you're like, oh God, I wasn't ready. And then you get down and you start going around like some of the turns and twists, and you're like, all right, I think I'm starting to figure this out. And then someone throws a loop-de-loop in there and you're like, no, I don't want on this anymore. I want to go home, but you can't because you have 11 hours left in your shift.
Oh man. One thing that I want to praise the EMS agency that Spencer and I both collectively worked at, not our current flight agency, but a previous grad agency, is they did have a difficult call policy to where if you ran a call that made you feel like that, like I can't go on with the day, you can make the choice to stop your day at any moment and you'd be paid from that point to the end of your scheduled shift. And you could just go home and you would still be paid. Because the thought is that we will make a lot of bad decisions for money. We really will. And so, which back to the whole sponsorship thing.
Yeah.
It is hard. Like when that guy's like, "Hey, you want these weird energy drinks?" And it's like, of course not. But how much? Just in case, you know. But anyway, so yeah. But we make a lot of bad decisions because of money, and that was one of the things that agency did really, really well. Was they had that policy where it's like, "Hey, you can make something that's purely a decision for your mental health, and you'll still get paid." And what was remarkable is that I think a lot of agencies would be like, "Oh, that's going to get abused." It just never got abused. We had just a handful of like a very small. This was a very large company, I should point out as well, and we had a very small group of people that used it more often than not. But they used it because they needed to, and so then the two that I can think of off the top of my head, they ended up doing. We have an employee assistance program, like a lot of agencies do. They ended up going through our EAP and getting more professional help for what was going on, and then they didn't need to use the policy anymore. So by having that policy where it's okay to have a bad call and then it's okay to go home and continue to get paid, not only does it let people do what's best for them long term, it also makes people less afraid to say they need help. Yeah. And it makes people less afraid to go get the help. And it also highlights for the company who might need help. And the rewards, it's hard. A lot of agencies won't do that because the return on that investment, because it is an investment financially, the return on that investment isn't immediate. It's something that will take years to see. And you only really see it by comparing yourself to companies that don't do that. But there is a valuable and tangible return on investment for having policies like that where you take care of your employees. So, yes, I think it can also go a long way to avoid burnout as well.
Yeah. We have that where I work. It's typically used for our 24-hour trucks. It's called downtime, where like if you've been run through the ground, like you typically are, you get like a certain amount of hours to like actually like go to sleep. Like you're not interrupted. Dispatch is told like you're pulled out of service. And nice. I've used something like that. I mean, I don't work a 24-hour truck. I'll never go back to 24s. The company I work at is my last stop in EMS before I move on. But I've used it, and it wasn't like a call that it's like it's going to keep me up for the rest of my life. Every night, whatever, and like I'm gonna think about it when I'm in a bad spot. But it was just very much like situational. Like it was my nephew's like he just turned 1 that day. First call of the day. I know I'm missing his birthday party. Is a 1-year-old having status epileptic seizures, and
oh no,
dude, it was a lot. And that's what during the call, like managed what I could, did what I could, got him to the ER. Congratulations, you get a paycheck, you did your job. It wasn't that. It was just like, I was like, oh my God, like, woo. So I called our supervisor. And I'm like, hey, I need some downtime. And he was like, do you need to go home? I was like, hey, my guy.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, but no, like, just give me an hour to get through this chart. Let me sit, let me breathe. And I think it's vital. We also have the EAPs. Like you have I'm not going to advertise my company right now. I appreciate the company I work for. Thank you, all of my supervisors and the man that writes my paycheck. But anyways,
one supervisor. Just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
You know who you are. Yeah. But expect an email from me Monday. But that is one thing. Send me another picture of my smart drive and suspend me for a day. You'll see. But that didn't happen to me. So to anybody that's thinking about joining EMS or somebody already in EMS and falls under the 4-year medic category, what is some advice you would like to pass on, if any at all?
Yeah, I think I would start with head on over to flightbridgeed.com/fast24 conference in Wilmington, North Carolina, June 10th through the 20th. Oh gosh, that's a hard question because there's so much.
I think the biggest one is that
the exposure on my screen just blew up. Sorry, I'm talking nerd talk.
No, I'm sorry, I'm blinded by your paleness.
Right? It's hard. It's fine.
No, I think the biggest thing is that we often feel like, oh, it has to be us. We have to be the ones who know everything. We have to be the ones who call the shots. And, like there's a lot of, I think, pressure that we put on ourselves as providers, especially if you're like, oh, I am the paramedic on the car, and I need to have all the answers. You don't have to. You can ask your partners. I've surprised myself a few times where I'm like, God, I don't know what's going on. And I've just, as a, well, I guess I'll just ask the other people here, hey guys, any ideas? And they all collectively go, oh shit, yeah, I don't know either. And it's really freeing in some fashion, because then you guys like, okay, none of us know what to do here. How should we proceed? And then you have a teamwork where you have ideas that are being generated. So I think that is the biggest thing to kind of help defeat the 4-year medic, shortcut things, the like, oh God, what do I do? I'm all alone on this island and I have to know everything, but I can't let other people know that I don't know. Is just, let other people know you don't know what to do, or that you're like, hey, and maybe don't say it like that, like, oh God, guys, I don't know what to do, but go like, here's what I'm thinking. Anyone else have other ideas? Am I missing something? And using the team, because like a lot of the problems that we identify are they're just inherent problems into the way that humans think. Confirmation bias. That is, I have seen this before and it was this, and now I'm going to look for evidence that supports that conclusion. That's just how your brain operates, because your brain wants to find the solution. It doesn't go, I've seen this before, now let me run it against everything else that would counter that belief to see if it's not that belief, because that is a terribly inefficient way to work. But when you add more people to the problem, when you add more brains into it and invite them to participate, so that they're not like, well, I think my paramedic's wrong here, but I don't want to say anything because I'm an EMT. Then you're mitigating that problem. You're mitigating a problem that every human inherently has in them, because that's just how our brains are designed. And that is how you save yourself from making those mistakes. Oftentimes, unless both of you are like, yep, this is 100% the wrong thing. But you know what? Like, at least you're not alone. You both can go, oh, we learned something today. And
you can write that IR together.
Yeah.
Fill out those spaces.
And that's going to, like, that is another thing, is like, you are going to be wrong. You are going to make mistakes. You are, like, to this day, there will be a call that I go on in the future where I go, nah, I don't need that kit. And I'll walk in there without it because I know better this time, and then I'll find out I'm wrong. Right. Like there's just you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes, and it's going to be okay. You just have to be able to learn from those mistakes, and to, if you're not good at math, make a drug sheet. Know yourself.
I think the key to really getting into EMS and doing well is, and everything he said, plus, I think one of the things to understand is, especially if you're just getting into EMS, is that it is a long career, and there's a lot of different places you can go in EMS, whether it's fire, private ambulance, or flight. For me, going to flight saved my career. I don't know that I would still be in EMS if I did not get into flight and enjoy it. I needed something different. I needed to start doing something where I felt like I was really making a difference, and I need to really work for a really strong, solid agency on top of all that. So what I would say is, recognize it's a career, it's a journey. Where you're starting now is not necessarily where you'll always be if it's a bad place. But generally speaking, seek out agencies that encourage open communication, that encourage people to admit their mistakes, and that really focus on building a better employee. And one of the things that we always talked about when I was my supervisor at my previous agency was before I left, I make it seem like I was the reason that we did good stuff. That's not what I mean. But before I left, we were really, really into just culture and high reliability organization stuff. And a big part of that, kind of the driving force behind that, like when you're a supervisor, when something goes wrong, when there's a bad outcome, everything you do, whether it's disciplinary, coaching, any of it, is all to build a better employee. So if you're going to discipline somebody, you're disciplining them in a way that's going to improve them as a paramedic. It's never a show of force. It's never a respect my authority kind of thing. We don't get people in trouble just to let them know they did bad. Most of the time, they know they've done wrong. They know what has gone wrong. Your goal is to build them up and support them as an employee. And so seek out agencies that practice the high reliability organization stuff, that practice just cultures, that make it okay to make mistakes and be internally reflective. And so a lot of companies like that are agencies that have really strong self-reporting policies. Like, hey, if you make a mistake, self-report. Self-report is the best thing you can possibly do. There are agencies that have really good policies around really good system policies. You know, they look at the system first when something goes wrong. They don't just look at the individuals. They don't just do automatic terminations when things go really, really bad. Those are the kind of agencies you want to watch out for. So if you're just coming into EMS, where you work can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
So.
I want to add in, make sure that you know how to have a poker face. I've learned very quickly I don't know how to have a poker face. And so my partner, I've gotten better, but there's still things that I can't hide. And she'll be like, it's a face.
Yeah. Just wear a mask.
Literally, that's what saved me initially. And then I got super lax. And it wasn't until I had this patient that, like, we rolled up on a scene and it was a car wreck. And we get to the patient and I go, oh God. Like, isn't that bad? I'm like, everything's fine. Haha.
Totally good.
Yeah.
My default, which I need to fix, is now like I just get like a tight smile and I start humming when I get really nervous. And
what song do you hum?
Anything. Typically it's Amazing Grace. I don't even know the words to Amazing Grace, but in my mind I'm like, if there are higher powers that be, they can show up real quick.
Probably better that it's not Come Home Sweet Chariot. or Come Forth Sweet Chariot. Whatever.
Yeah. I hum Happy Birthday, so I don't know if that's, you know.
No, I do want to highlight something else that y'all said was just like with the imposter syndrome and stuff like that. Talking to your partner and asking your partner questions. When me and my partner first, the one I have right now, we've almost been working together for a year now. Like that's the homie, that's my girl. But when we first started working together, she's like, I really appreciate that you admit that sometimes you don't have an answer. And I'm like, I mean, I do have answers. I'm not stupid. She's like, no, not like that. I'm like, please don't sell me short. I already sell myself short. But she'll just say, like, you know, if I don't know this, and it's not like life critical, like I know what a stimulant looks like, but if I can't tell you which artery is according to which lead, like I'll look it up and I'll be like, oh yeah, and now we both know. And then even in interventions, when like I know, for instance, the first time I pushed Levofed was with her. And I was like, hey, look, like things aren't looking good. I'm going to go ahead and start Levo. Like we need to head on out to the hospital effective immediately. After she was like, how'd you do the calculations? How'd you do this and that? I was like, I'm going to be honest. It was my first time and I was really nervous. So I looked up the protocol really fast. And she was like, oh, really? I was like, yeah, but don't tell nobody. So
honestly, though, I mean, I think that's an okay tactic. And the agency I work at now, that same nurse was like, hey man, like so the agency we work at now, because we cover such a large area, we don't really worry about county specific protocols. We have what we call our patient care guidelines, emphasis on the guideline. But yeah, he was like, hey man, like you're not going to know everything at all times, and things change. Like if you need to look something up in the PCGs, it is better to look it up and be right than to wing it and be wrong. Because what I can tell you is that our physician advisor is not going to sit there and read the chart and be like, you know what? I bet he had to look that up and I'm mad. That's not going to happen. But what will happen if he's like, oh, that's the wrong drug, then yeah, he's going to be upset. So yeah, That's
Yep.
I think it's totally okay. Now, obviously, you have to have a baseline level of knowledge. You can't be sitting there and be like, okay, CPR. What's the ratio on that again? What was the Taylor Swift song I was supposed to? That's not even going to be in your face. So,
Googling talk squiggly lines on your SVT.
yeah. What do angry squiggles look like? If the first words your paramedic says when they walk in is "Hey Siri," then it's probably a bad.
Is good for and bad for you.
Yeah.
No, that's all I got. I appreciate you guys so much. One, for your podcast, obviously, but also just in general, like,
We don't do a lot of interviews. I mean, it's been 4 years and we've done I think this is the third. It is maybe the fourth interview. It's the third. It's definitely the third. And we don't do them a whole lot. And so, but your podcast, I mean, like I said, like Master Your Medics has taken notice. They've been working with you. We've listened to your podcast and you got a good show that's really worth being proud of. So we're just as happy to be here as I think you are happy to have us. So thanks for having us on.
I appreciate it. And like I was saying before my dog interrupted, your guys' podcast, stellar, but also just y'all, like, as providers and with your wisdom and, like, just, I know it's overkill at this point, but, like, relatability and just, like, it's not like these two guys that sit in an office and, they spat off all this information because they've done this for years, but it's, people that actually want to improve the field and providers. And it's not something that's huge in the field, but especially on a higher level like y'all have, on a higher audience ground. So,
well, thank you so much.
I appreciate y'all. And if you don't know EMS 2020 because you live under a rock or you haven't had a conversation with me, go check them out. They have some really good stuff. If you want to hit me up and find out the one that I submitted, holler at you, girl.
It's a fun one. I remember it very well.
I do too.
So yeah, and if that's all y'all got, that's all I got. And as I end every single episode, so it's that.
The 22 at the Lips podcast is designed to support, not replace, the relationship that exists between a practitioner and his or her medical director. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host, guest, and not necessarily of Master Your Medics. The information provided during this podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for your approved protocols.